Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're headed into our final segment of the show. Now that March Madness has officially come to a close, I want to sort of talk about some of the NBA prospects that have risen, have maybe taken some type of a falter in their draft stock, but just sort of talk about this class as a whole that, as we know, has not been necessarily talked about in the best of light, where there are some scouts out there supposedly saying it is one of the, if not the worst draft they've ever seen. I feel like that's a little bit of an overreaction. I was there. The Anthony Bennett draft was 2013, I believe. And I feel like there are going to be more contributors. 2013 was a very rough class looking back at that one, where just not very many. Outside of Giannis, who was outside of the lottery. Giannis obviously was not the prospect that he is now, but definitely a pretty lackluster group there, especially when you look in the lottery itself. But as for this upcoming draft, I do feel like there are going to be a number of players that can get rotational minutes, and I want to start by just talking about the players that we have most recently seen in UConn and Purdue. Really, we're talking about one guy in Purdue and a handful of potential guys in UConn. We're going to start with the national champs and UConn, and talking about Donovan Clingan, who really was the biggest riser in the eyes of the public throughout the NCAA tournament. Seemed like he was going to be a late lottery pick when we were coming into the NCAA tournament, and now many experts are putting him top 5, top 3, and Kevin Pelton of ESPN just put out an article this morning projecting NBA draft prospects to the next level, and he had Clingan at number 1 overall. I don't think he's going to go number 1. A couple of the overseas prospects are the ones that are sort of honing in on those top picks. Alex Sarr in particular is seeming like he's going to be the number 1 overall pick, 7-footer who can spread the floor better than Clingan can play solid defense. I don't know if he's maybe the level, but that being said, I've watched much more of Clingan than I have of Sarr. But Risa Shea is another one overseas that has sort of drawn attention as well. So Clingan is going to be a very solid pro in my eyes. If we're looking at the past few draft classes, I definitely don't think he goes number 1. I don't think he goes top 3 necessarily, and maybe even top 5 in any of these recent classes. But you do have to take into consideration the level of competition that is surrounding him in this class. And if you want to look at the game against Purdue, I know that Zach Edey scored 37 points, but don't let that fool you by the fact that Clingan is a very solid post defender. A lot of Edey's points came down the stretch of the game where Clingan was sitting out with foul trouble, and so he has that defensive upside. When you look at the Illinois game, we saw the Illinois try and force him into foul trouble going at him, and he just absolutely made them pay. That was maybe his most impressive performance that I've ever seen from him. And I also think that if you talk offensively, he's not overly skilled necessarily. There isn't very much of a shot to build off of when it comes to Clingan, but I do also think that his game translates better to the NBA than Zach Edey's does. And again, no sense of shooting. He took just 9 3-pointers in his college career. He only shot 58% from the free throw line this season, so it doesn't seem like that's necessarily going to be a part of his game. But I feel like I trust the pick and roll game with him, with the instincts that he has, the angles that he takes on his rolls, his hands in terms of, not just catching the ball necessarily, but some of those redirection lobs can be impressive with him as well. And when you look at Edey, who I guess we'll just dive into on the other end of this sort of evaluation. With Edey, yes, he has the size. He's 7'4". He's going to be a first-round pick. He's somebody that is absolutely worth a flyer on. I don't think that that is good enough to be a lottery pick, especially when you look at the fact that, all through his college career, especially this season, we saw he can't really handle himself in the pick and roll game. He's someone that has to drop into coverage, maybe in certain systems that can have some success, but I think he's going to get exposed at a higher level when the level of shot creation and shot making is higher. So as a bench big, he can definitely be good. I think somebody made the comparison to Boban Marjanovic and just being a massive body and sort of eating minutes at times. I feel like that could maybe be seen as a little disrespectful, but at the same time, with Edey, the majority of his points came off of these post-ups that are just pretty rare. The, back to the basket, big man post-ups doesn't really translate to the NBA level in the same way. So, yes, we saw him be an absolutely dominant scorer in college, and that was even facing all of these double teams, and still was able to get it to go. But it's not like he's an incredible decision maker out of these post-ups. And he's not an incredible, I wouldn't even say decision maker, just like a passer in general. I don't feel tremendous about his ability to sort of read the defense, especially an NBA defense, at a high enough level that is going to necessarily translate to the NBA. I don't know. Again, I think it's worth a flyer on Edey, and I'm not the only person who's saying this, of course. I can see him being drafted in the first round, and NBA GM saying, hey, look, this is a 2-time Naismith Player of the Year. He's 7'4". Why couldn't we sort of just add him to our roster? I don't know. If you're looking at a team that's in a conference of Giannis or Embiid or Jokic, and you anticipate a matchup like that, he could just be somebody to throw in as a different type of look, to be physical, eat a couple fouls, and not have it ultimately disrupt your game. But outside of a rotational player, I don't know if I necessarily see it with Edey. Somebody I'm higher on is Stephon Castle of UConn, and I've sort of talked about him at various times here. The fact that how athletic he is, and I do think that some of the decision-making stuff with him is very positive. I love his playmaking out of drives. I like the way that he can drive, the intensity that he brings on the glass and on defense as well. For him, it's going to be the three-point shooting. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast or not, but he sort of reminds me of a young Colin Sexton to some degree, where, I wouldn't even say erratic necessarily. He brings the intensity, which is a huge positive. He's willing to outwork just about anybody. He can slash. He is athletic, but the shot can be inconsistent at times. It's not that Castle is scared, and I'm sure that he is going to work on his three moving forward. We saw the fact that he wasn't afraid to take those shots in the Final Four game and the championship game, but is he going to be able to bring it to a level that is at least respectable, that teams aren't going to heavily help off of? That's sort of the question with him, but I like Castle a lot. I guess we'll talk about Isaiah Collier briefly here, because he did just announce that he is declaring for the draft earlier today. The guard out of USC was sort of the guy that overshadowed Bronny James in terms of freshman talent at a USC team that definitely wasn't good, but he was also dealing with injuries this year, so it's not like he had the college season that a lot of people were anticipating. Struggled with turning the ball over at times, but he is lightning quick, that is for sure. Like a De'Aaron Fox type speed. I think that his handle is pretty solid as well. Beyond that, I feel like he doesn't scream to me. He has potential, absolutely. He doesn't scream to me, day one starter by any means, but he can definitely work his way into a rotation. I feel like there is sort of bust potential with him to some degree, but I also think he could be worth taking a flyer on. One of the other big-time risers in this NCAA tournament was Jared McCain, who was very low on mock drafts and in the eyes of draft experts headed into the season and really for a lot of the year, but down the second half of the season, the shooting was just undeniable for him and really propelled him into, the idea that he can be a very solid pro, somebody who can space the floor out. Does he have tremendous size? No, not necessarily. He probably has to work on being a little bit of a better passer if he is going to just be relying on his three-point shot, standing at 6'3", can be a little bit concerning, but also somebody that I do think can definitely work his way into a rotation. Does he have superstar potential? Not necessarily in my eyes, but is still somebody that I think should be a lottery pick, and that was a conversation that we absolutely were not having for much of the season. Last couple names here that I will throw out are Rob Dillingham and Reed Sheppard, the guards from Kentucky. Both bench players, but they were playing starter minutes and playing the most impactful basketball out of all of the very talented freshman class that Kentucky had this past year. Dillingham is more of an on-the-ball guy offensively. We know that he can create his own shots. He's a tough shot maker, and he does have a little bit of that more, lead guard role in his future. Feels like a Cam Thomas, maybe an early Jalen Green type archetype that he can sort of follow there, but shows a lot of positives. Defense is fine, but also not particularly incredible in my eyes. Reed Sheppard is one that he sort of fills in as more of a role player that he seems like a safe pick to me, where it's not like he is tremendously athletic, but his hands are phenomenal on defense, helps lead deflections and steals. He knocks down his shots, and he was disappointing. Both of them really were disappointing in Kentucky's loss to Oakland, which hurt them to some degree, but the fact that they were able to put together the seasons that they did in their niche sort of roles and buy into how that was going to help contribute to the team as a whole. And I know disappointing loss against Oakland, but for all the ups and downs they had, they did still finish as a 3 seed in the tournament, which definitely looked unlikely at certain points of the year. So that is all we really have on the prospects for now. I'm a big fan of Jacoby Walter as well. I didn't even talk about Cam Spencer, who I also think that from his NCAA tournament appearances, he could have worked himself into a potential flyer as well. But we're going to talk more about the NBA draft as it approaches, but still just April, still very early in the process, and we're going to have plenty of time to analyze all of these prospects and the others that we haven't even named yet. But on that note, that is all we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. We are live from 2 to 3 every weekday, 2 to 3 Eastern, that is. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Check us out on socials as well. But for now, that is all we have. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.